Chapter 11. Trapped and Attacked. Mid-air, blind and frightened, Pickett hung like a flightless bird out of his element. The moment passed, an endless fraction of a second. And now he was falling fast, plunging through blackness into he knew not what. He closed his eyes. He flailed wildly as if it might somehow slow him down. But he came down and down like a sack of stones. One moment he was surrounded by nothing but air. Then he was submerged in ice-cold water. Pickett sank deep in the water, kicking frantically to reverse his downward momentum. Finally, he fought his way up and up in the darkness to break the surface of the water and take in great gulps of air. He opened his eyes. In a few moments he could see, albeit dimly. He was in a huge cavern, the bottom of which formed the large pool in which he found himself. Above, there were cracks in the walls that let in small shafts of light. After total darkness, it seemed almost bright. He strained to see a shore but couldn't locate anything. Steep walls arching into a dome surrounded him. He was still confused and his eyes were adjusting to the room's dim light. Heather. He twisted, paddling in place, searching the water for his sister and Smalls. "Heather!" he shouted. "Smalls!" He looked all over, desperate to find them. He could not lose Heather again. In his frantic searching, he saw a little shore of pebbles in a corner, barely illuminated by two low lights from the cave wall. He saw that the pool he swam in was formed from an excess of water pouring into the cavern, with the water escaping through some unseen route deep below them. He thought he could hear the water pouring out somewhere, but he couldn't tell where. "Heather!" he shouted, shivering. His voice shook. He swam hard for the pebble shore, then heard the water stir behind him. He turned to see his sister, struggling to stay above water. She was clutching the slumping form of Smalls, who appeared to be finished. "Help," she whispered. Energized by the sight of his sister alive and awakened, no doubt by the cold blast of water, he crossed to her in seconds. "He's," she said, but she wasn't able to finish. "Come on," he said. "I have to get you to the shore." "We can't leave him," she said, treading water with difficulty. "He's alive." "But we have to," Pickett said. He couldn't save them both. "Come on!" he screamed, trying to grab onto her. "We can do it," Heather said, teeth chattering. "Together, I can help you." They each took hold of Smalls under one arm. Heather winced as she strained, and they swam desperately for the shore. The whole time they swam toward the distant beach of pebbles, Pickett wondered when they would all sink for good. Somehow, they at last fell heavily onto the shore, freezing and out of breath. They lunged forward and together dragged Smalls out of the icy pool. Pickett collapsed beside Smalls, shivering and coughing. His mind blanked for a while, and he almost lost consciousness. Then he came tearing back to life with flashing images of their flight. Pickett crawled to Heather and wrapped her in a hug. "I thought," he began. "Me too," she said shakily. They held each other for a little while longer, warming up a little and saying nothing. "How are you?" he asked. "I think I'll be okay," she said. "I was spent for sure. I'm all right besides being a little rattled and cold. My shoulder is hurting, but I don't think it's broken. I think I can use it." She stood up and looked around wearily. "What happened to us? And who is that?" She indicated the slumped form of Smalls. "His name is Smalls," Pickett said. "He helped Uncle Wilfred rescue us." "He was our uncle?" she said. "I thought he might have been father. Where is he now, this uncle of ours?" "He's nearby, but we have to get out of here," he said, crossing to the wall of rock. "We need to act fast. There are cruel things in this place. They're after us." "Of course there are," Heather said, shrugging and shaking her head. "Of course there are. Uncle Wilfred's out there somewhere. We need to find him and get as far away from Nick Hollow as we can." He stumbled across stones, seeking in the shadows for any hint of a way out. Heather crossed to the slumping form of Smalls. "I think he hit his head," she said. She felt the bump on his head and frowned. She left him and went to the water's edge. She plunged her hand into the water and retrieved a small stone. "What are you doing?" Pickett called. "Helping," she said. "I think." She placed the icy stone on the bump and held it there, despite the numbing cold she was feeling. Pickett looked away, scanning the rock wall and feeling for anything that might be a way out. "Hey!" he shouted. "What is it?" Heather called. But Pickett's answer was drowned out by loud screams from the caves above. It sounded like dozens of creatures were sliding down the tunnels overhead. "That sounds bad," she whispered to Small's unconscious form. "Will this never end?" "Heather," Pickett called, "come help me." A boat was leaning along the wall. A rusty chain trailed down to the ground where a heavy anchor lay. "Let's pull it down," Pickett said. There was an odd assortment of things all around the boat. Ropes, oars, pans, all sorts of gear strewn out on a rotting table. Behind them, they heard shrieks and an awful clamor as the cavern roof shot dark shapes into the air, then the cold pool below. They searched for a way to lower the boat as the cavern filled with loud, piercing wails, then silenced again in terrific splashes. The rabbits heaved on the boat and pulled it down by the old anchor chain. It smashed to the ground as they clambered out of the way. "What now?" Heather asked, her eyes on the pool and the desperate creatures splashing and flailing in it. "We have no time," she said, trying not to let panic creep into her voice. "I don't know exactly," Pickett said, throwing the rope, oars, a net, and a few small items he couldn't identify into the boat. Into the silence the call of a whippoorwill echoed faintly in the cavern. Pickett ran to the wall. "What are you doing?" Heather asked as the bird call was repeated. "Uncle Wilfred," he called, running toward the sound, which seemed to come from one of the nearby shafts of light. Beside the beach, the pooled water moved into a small channeled stream, which appeared to have an outlet somewhere deeper still beneath them. He couldn't see how it worked, but he heard the release of water outside and below them. It must lead to the stream outside. How? He had no idea. The piled-up rocks of the wall, in which there were a few openings marked by shafts of light, served as a dam against the great store of water in the cavern. Pickett considered swimming deep down and trying to escape that way, but he had no idea how they would get Smalls out. He clambered up the part of the stone wall above the waterline and found a foothold that allowed him to see outside of one of the light-filled openings. It was like a small rectangular window. He peered out. There was his uncle looking worriedly up at the stone wall from a spot near the stream. Uncle Wilfred was right outside the bottom of the seventh mound. Between his uncle and the three of them stood a high, firm wall of built-up rocks, forged together by art and age. It was like the entrance to the cave on the fifth mound, blocked intentionally, the wall apparently unmovable. The stream flowed steadily beside Uncle Wilfred. "Uncle!" Pickett shouted. "Pickett?" Uncle Wilfred said, moving with great speed to the small opening. "Is Smalls all right?" "He's injured, knocked out," Pickett said quickly. "We've got to get out of here." "You have to protect him until I can get inside," Uncle Wilfred shouted. "Don't let anything—" But Pickett cut him off. "Uncle Wilfred, they're coming. We have no time." Pickett tore at the small opening, and Uncle Wilfred threw his shoulder into the wall with furious desperation. It was a crafted wall, and Pickett thought it could be torn down given enough time. "Smalls!" Uncle Wilfred cried. The wall shook a little, and some small stones plopped into the pool. Uncle Wilfred was strong, but Pickett knew it would take much more time than they had to do it that way. "They're almost here!" Heather shouted. Pickett turned to see her dragging Smalls up the bank of the pebble shore, the sheath of his sword rattling against the cold stones. Pickett glanced at the boat. Then he shouted to Uncle Wilfred, "Save your strength! Wait here!" He ran to the water's edge. "Help me drag him, Pickett!" Heather yelled. But Pickett did not help her. He knelt beside Smalls and drew his sword. Heather thought he had gone mad and was preparing to fight their attackers, but he ran away as soon as he had it. He crossed to the boat and swung the sword with a grunt. A metallic clink sounded. Again and again he swung the blade. Finally there was a sound of snapping chain, and Pickett cast the sword into the boat. He gripped the chain and ran for the cave wall. Just before he reached the wall, the heavy anchor on the other side of the chain dug in, stopped him short of the wall. "Help!" he shouted. Heather, who had begun to drag Smalls toward the boat, ran to Pickett, grabbed hold of the chain, and helped him drag it the last few feet. Pickett climbed the rock wall again and fed the chain through the rectangle window. Uncle Wilfred looked puzzled, perplexed, as the piles of chain fell at his feet. "Pickett," he shouted, "what is this?" "It's an anchor," Pickett puffed out. "Pull with all your strength." Realization dawned on Uncle Wilfred's face. He didn't hesitate a moment but sprinted away, twisting to wrap the chain around him as he ran. Pickett climbed down and ran back to the shore. The creatures were coming ashore. There were at least 10 swimming rats, a few small bats who had spluttered and splashed into flight, and other creatures Pickett couldn't see well. He didn't care. He was exhausted and cold and had no time to watch. The attackers would need only a moment to recover before descending on them. They had only a few precious seconds now. Pickett hoped it was all they needed. Heather struggled to drag Smalls to the little boat. Pickett joined her, and they quickly moved him nearer. As they breathlessly pulled him toward the old boat, they saw the chain tighten and the heavy anchor begin to drag. It skipped and clanged along the ground and then lifted into the air. The anchor struck the rock wall with a tremendous crash. The wall held. He heard a sound of grinding stone, the rattle of rocks crumbling down the wall and disappearing into the water. Dust clouds filled the shafts of light, but the wall stood. Pickett looked back. The beach was filling with creeping creatures bearing down on them. The noise of their cursing threats and screeching cries filled the cavern. They would reach the boat in seconds. The anchor slid down the dam wall, slumping into the water. Pickett imagined Uncle Wilfred, the jarring he would have endured to pull the anchor so hard without result. Pickett made ready to defend his sister for as long as he could. He grabbed the sword, which was chipped now, and held it up with trembling hands. He stood in front of the boat, hopeless and afraid. He watched Heather pull Smalls into the boat and turned to see their attackers only a few steps away. "I'm sorry, Heather,"